A haunting family dinner turns into the beginning of a reckoning. Callista Carter, once robbed of her inheritance by her own parents, now returns to the same dining table not to forgive, but to reclaim everything they stole. This isn't just revenge, it's justice served cold. I sat at the oak dining table, the same one that had witnessed 30 years of Carter family dinners, fights, and celebrations. The table where my grandfather once taught me to play checkers. The table where I used to believe I belonged. But tonight the air felt heavier, and the walls seemed to lean in. I wasn't surrounded by family. I was surrounded by opportunists who just happened to share my blood. My mother, Vivian. My father, Douglas. My brother, Grant. "Callista, honey, thank you for coming," my mother said, her voice dripping with the fake sweetness she reserved only for one thing: asking for favors. At 62, her blonde hair was streaked with silver, but her manipulation tactics, still sharp as ever. I didn't smile. I didn't answer. Instead, I let my eyes wander the room, the wallpaper peeling at the corners, the hardwood floors dulled by years of neglect, and the walls lined with family photos. Grandpa's fishing trips, my high school graduation, Grant's wedding, and then the silence in the frames. I was in fewer and fewer photos after I turned 19. I leaned back in my chair. "What's this about?" I asked, though I already knew. The foreclosure notice I'd gotten through my bank contact had told me everything. My father cleared his throat, the sound deep but weaker than I remembered. At 65, he was still broad-shouldered, still loud, but age had dulled his edge. "We've hit a rough patch," he began. "Financially speaking." I let out a dry laugh before I could stop myself. "Again?" Grant shot me a warning look from across the table. He was always the peacekeeper when it suited him, the golden boy who could do no wrong. 36, a little softer around the middle now, but still smug in the comfort of being the favorite. My mother slid a calculator across the table like she was presenting evidence in a trial. The glowing red digits made me smirk. $180,000. "That's what we need," she said softly, her fingers trembling, "to save the house." I stared at the number, and here's the funny part: I felt nothing. No shock, no outrage, just emptiness. My father jumped in with his rehearsed monologue, one I could practically mouth along with him. "This house has been in our family for generations. Your grandfather would want us to keep it. It's about family duty, Callista." "Family duty, family duty," I repeated, rolling the words around in my mouth like something bitter. Grant leaned forward, his expression carefully crafted into concern. "We wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate, Cully. You know that?" "Oh, I knew. I knew because it was the same song and dance every time. They only called when they needed something. Usually money. What happened to the equity loan you took out last year?" I asked, my tone sharper than intended. Mom and Dad exchanged a quick glance, the kind that said everything without words. "Business investments," my father muttered. I tilted my head. "Like the business investment that ate my inheritance?" The words cut through the room like glass shattering. My father's face darkened. "That was 15 years ago. Are you still harping on that?" $120,000. I said the number like I was reciting a math fact. "It was my college fund. My future." His fists clenched on the table. "That business would have set us all up for life if what?" I snapped, my voice calm but razor sharp. "If the market hadn't shifted, if your partner hadn't walked out, if you'd actually understood the industry you poured my money into." The silence that followed was delicious. Mom dabbed at tears that weren't there. "We've always supported you, Callista. When you needed us." I laughed, cold and humorless. "When did I need you?" "When I was working 3 jobs to put myself through school? When I graduated with honors and none of you showed up? When I stood alone on a stage holding a diploma that should have been my grandfather's legacy?" My father slammed his fist on the table so hard the calculator bounced. "You're nothing but a freeloader who abandoned this family." The room went silent. Mom looked away. Grant kept staring at his hands, and me? I smiled. A small, quiet smile that unnerved them more than if I'd screamed. "I'm not your ATM, I said, my voice steady. "My decision final," Mom gasped, her voice trembling.
Callista Marie Carter. Her tears were flowing now.
Real ones this time, not the crocodile kind. She was panicking because for once in her life, her tricks weren't working. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If you don't help us, we'll lose everything." I stood slowly, letting the chair scrape against the hardwood. For the first time in this house, I felt taller than all of them, more powerful. I picked up my water glass, set it neatly on a coaster, and looked my mother in the eye. "I've made my decision," I said. Her hand shot out to grab mine, but I stepped back before she could touch me. "Good night." The room stayed frozen as I walked to the door. Behind me, I heard Grant's hushed voice, desperate and small. "What are we going to do now?" The front door clicked shut behind me, soft but final. And in the quiet North Carolina night, with magnolia blossoms heavy in the air, I smiled. They thought this was over. But they had no idea what was coming. I closed my eyes at the dining table, and suddenly I'm 19 again. The day of Grandpa's funeral is burned into me like a scar. I remember clutching his framed photograph, his kind smile frozen forever. He was the only one in this family who truly saw me not as a wallet, not as a pawn, but as Callista, the girl who loved math more than makeup. That was the day the attorney read his will. And for the first time, something had been left to me. To my granddaughter, Callista, I leave $120,000. For her education and future security. My hands had trembled holding the papers. For once, the future didn't feel impossible. A degree in computer science. Maybe even grad school. A way out of Garner, North Carolina. But that dream lasted less than a week. Because 3 days later, my father sat me down at this very oak table. His tone wasn't gentle, it was persuasive, heavy, practiced. The way a man convinces himself first, then convinces everyone else. "The family business is struggling," he said, voice low, urgent. "It's just a temporary setback. If we had capital to invest, we could turn it around. Think about what that would mean for all of us." I remember looking at him, searching for sincerity, for reassurance. Instead, I found charm. His greatest weapon. He always had that twinkle in his eye when he spoke about opportunity. He leaned closer, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It won't just be my business, Callie. It'll be ours. One day it'll be yours and Grant's too. But we need you to help us now." I was 19, grieving, vulnerable, and desperate to believe my father wanted me to be part of something. So I signed. With trembling hands, I handed him the check. That night, Mom hugged me like I was some kind of hero. "You've saved us, sweetheart," she whispered. "You'll see, it'll come back to you tenfold." It never did. Within 18 months, the business was gone, bankrupt. And so was my inheritance. The ledgers told the story clearer than my father ever did. Thousands spent on business dinners at steakhouses. Thousands more on office furniture that somehow ended up in our living room. A company car that magically became Dad's personal vehicle. And then there was Grant. The same week the company collapsed, he pulled into our driveway in a brand new Ford F-150, custom wheels. Premium sound system. Paid for with emergency capital. I stared at that truck while I ate ramen noodles in my studio apartment above a laundromat. The walls sweated with humidity, the machines rattled all night, and rent was $450 a month. The exact amount I scraped together with 3 jobs barista at Percolate Coffee in the mornings, tutoring high school math in the afternoons, and entering medical billing data until midnight. I'd collapse on my second-hand futon, too tired to shower, too tired to cry, too tired to do anything but set the alarm and do it all again. That was my college life. One night during finals week, I cracked. I called home. "Just to hear a voice," Mom answered. I could hear laughter in the background, the crackle of a grill. "We're celebrating your father's new business contact," she explained. Dad's booming laugh carried through the phone. Grant's girlfriend squealed at some joke. "Is everything okay?" she asked lightly. "Do you need something?" I stared at the flickering lamp on my desk, the ramen packet torn open beside my textbook. What did I need? Sleep, support, a family who cared whether I drowned or not. But I couldn't say that. So I lied. "No, I'm fine." I wasn't fine. I was becoming something else. Harder, colder. Because in the Carter household, loyalty only flowed in one direction. From me, outward, never back. Dad was the dreamer, always chasing the next big break. Mom was the apologist, crying when things went wrong but never holding him accountable. And Grant? He was the golden boy, the investment that never paid off, but they kept pouring into him anyway. And me? I was the cautionary tale. The one who harped on the past, the one they drained dry and then left to rebuild on her own. But here's the thing. I did rebuild. And I never forgot. Every receipt, every bank statement, every scrap of evidence, I saved it. Not out of spite at first, but because I wanted proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that I had been robbed. Proof that one day, when they tried to rewrite the story, I could lay it all out. And now, 15 years later, that day had come. They thought I'd forgotten. They thought time had dulled the wound. But betrayal doesn't fade, it calcifies. It turns into armor, and I was ready to wear it. Back in the present, I opened my eyes at the dining table. My parents and brother are still watching me, still waiting for me to play the role I used to, the naive daughter, the ATM, the problem solver. But that girl died a long time ago. In her place sat a woman who had nothing left to lose, and everything to reclaim. The walls of my first apartment sweated with humidity. It was a shoebox studio wedged above Garner's laundromat, where the constant roar of industrial dryers rattled the thin floorboards beneath my futon. Rent was $450 a month, the exact amount I scraped together by juggling 3 jobs. Mornings I brewed lattes at Percolate Coffee, my hands stained with espresso grounds. Afternoons I tutored high school students in algebra, stretching patience I didn't even have for myself. Nights, I hunched over a flickering desk lamp, entering medical billing codes until my eyes blurred and my fingers ached. Sleep wasn't sleep anymore. It was collapse. 4 hours here. 3 hours there. I'd wake, body buzzing with exhaustion, force down a granola bar, and drag myself into the cycle all over again. Meanwhile, just 5 miles away, my parents were grilling steaks in the backyard, laughing, celebrating, living like I hadn't just handed them my future. I'll never forget one night during finals week. I called home. I don't even know why. Maybe I just needed someone to remind me I wasn't alone. Mom answered, cheerful, distracted. In the background, I heard clinking glasses, Dad's booming laugh, and the squeal of Grant's girlfriend. "We're celebrating your father's new business contact," she explained, her voice breezy, as if I weren't drowning on the other end of the line. She asked, "Is everything okay? Do you need something?" What I needed was sleep. What I needed was support. What I needed was a family that didn't measure my worth in dollar signs. But all I said was, "I'm fine." And she believed me. But I wasn't fine. I was unraveling. My jeans grew loose as my diet shrank to instant ramen and discount peanut butter sandwiches. My hands trembled constantly from caffeine and fatigue. There were nights I stared at the ceiling of that suffocating studio, wondering how many more mornings I could take. If not for a few people, I might have broken completely. Professor Williams was the first. He noticed the bloodshot eyes, the shaky hands gripping my pencil during advanced statistics. After class, he pulled me aside. "You have talent," he told me, "but talent means nothing if you destroy yourself in the process." He helped me land a programming internship, one job that paid better than the 3 I was killing myself with combined. Then there was Martha Chun at TriStat Technologies. She knew what it meant to work your way up the hard way. She created a flexible schedule so I could finish my degree while interning. She told me, "Some of us have to climb with bare hands. But once you reach the top, no one can knock you off." And then, of course, there was Naomi Briggs, the attorney. She took my side years later when a competitor tried to steal my algorithm. She told me, "You understand documentation, Callista. Most people can't prove what happened to them. But you can." These people weren't family. But they gave me what my family never could, belief. The day I finally graduated, the sky was clear, the auditorium buzzing with proud families. When my name was called, Callista Carter, summa cum laude, the crowd erupted in cheers, but I didn't look at the stage. I looked for 4 empty chairs. The ones my family had promised to fill. They weren't there. I held my diploma case like it was a lifeline, surrounded by balloons and flowers from strangers' parents. My phone buzzed a few minutes later. A text from Mom. "Grant's car trouble. So sorry. Dinner next week." Dinner never happened. Celebration never came. It was just me, alone. Again. 3 days later, Tristat offered me a permanent position, salary, benefits, and finally a way to breathe without feeling like my lungs were on fire. I unpacked my single box of belongings in a tiny office with a window overlooking downtown Raleigh. I placed my grandfather's photograph on the desk, his smile steady, his presence grounding. And then I locked away the business agreement I'd signed with my father, the document that stole my inheritance. That day I made a vow. I will never be vulnerable to them again, not financially, not emotionally, not ever. I didn't know then that 15 years later, I would be planning to take back the very house where my future was stolen. But I knew something important had shifted inside me. I wasn't the naive daughter anymore. I was becoming the woman who would one day hold the deed to their survival. And that terrified them more than losing the house ever would. 6 years. That's how long it took me to climb from junior analyst to department head at Meridian Data Systems. 6 years of 12-hour days, late-night code reviews, and weekends spent refining reports instead of relaxing. 6 years of turning every bruise life gave me into a stepping stone. And finally, I had what my parents never could manage: stability. I straightened the framed certificate on my office wall. Employee of the Year 2 years in a row. Beneath it, the brass plate gleamed in the morning sun, reflecting against my neatly organized desk. The office wasn't the largest, not the corner one reserved for executives, but it was mine, earned, not begged, not stolen. At my desk, numbers finally made sense, projections balanced. Investments grew, slow and steady, in conservative index funds and a modest IRA. After years of drowning, financial security felt like oxygen. Every deposit into my emergency fund was a quiet rebellion against the family that had left me gasping for air. "Your 10 o'clock is here," Maya, my assistant, said from the doorway. I nodded, sliding the portfolio I'd been reviewing into a folder. "Send them in." The meetings came and went, my mind laser-focused, but over lunch I chose solitude. While my colleagues laughed over salads at the bistro across the street, I sat at my desk with a turkey sandwich, updating my savings spreadsheet. The numbers told my story: recovery, control, freedom. And yet, no matter how much I built, my phone still carried the same ghost. That ghost called at 2:17 p.m. one Tuesday afternoon. Mother. I let it ring. I had been ignoring her calls for months. But something about the timing, the deliberate precision, made me suspicious. When the voicemail notification appeared, I pressed play against my better judgment. Her voice wavered, carefully towing the line between theatrical and genuine distress. "Callista, honey, your father, his heart. The doctor says the stress is making everything worse." A pause, heavy, calculated. "The bank called again about the house. We're behind $280,000 now, with all the fees."
If only we had more support.
I hit delete, but I couldn't delete the number that echoed in my brain. $280,000. Almost the exact value of my investment portfolio and emergency fund combined. That night, I sat at my kitchen counter with county records pulled up on my laptop. My fingers flew across the keyboard, uncovering what her tearful voicemail had carefully hidden: 5 equity loans, 3 refinances. A decade of bleeding the house dry. They had treated my grandfather's home like an ATM. I closed the laptop, my jaw tight. A knock at my door startled me. "Evening research again?" Mrs. Abernathy, my retired librarian neighbor, called from across the hall as I collected my mail. She always noticed patterns, hers and everyone else's. "Family matters," I replied with a polite smile. Inside, I stared at the manila folder marked inheritance. The weight of it hadn't lessened in 15 years. Inside were just 3 papers: my grandfather's will, the check receipt, and the business agreement my father had pushed into my trembling hands. The same 3 papers that had rewritten my life. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd kept for a moment just like this. "Briggs Legal Services," answered a brisk, familiar voice. "Naomi, it's Callista Carter." My voice was calm, controlled, but my pulse hammered in my throat. "I need your counsel." "It's time." The following Wednesday, I sat across from her in her downtown office, the courthouse looming in the distance like a silent witness. Naomi tapped her tablet, her expression unreadable. "Your family home enters foreclosure proceedings next month. If no payment is made, the bank will auction it." "And if someone buys it at auction?" I asked, though I already knew. They'd be evicted within 30 days. I leaned back in the leather chair, the weight of years pressing into me. Then I asked the question that shifted everything. What if I wanted to buy it? Naomi removed her glasses, studying me. That's an interesting approach. May I ask why? Her question demanded honesty, so I gave it. Because that house holds the only good memories I have left. My grandfather built the study with his own hands. He taught me strategy there, how to think 3 moves ahead. I won't let them gamble it away completely, Naomi nodded, understanding. We can arrange a private purchase before the auction. Your identity would remain confidential until closing. They'd never sell to me directly. They won't have a choice, she said simply. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt something powerful stir inside me, not just anger, not just grief, but triumph. This wasn't about rescuing them. It was about reclaiming what was mine. And this time, I wasn't signing papers with trembling hands. This time, I was holding the pen with purpose. The day I decided to buy the house, I didn't feel nervous. I felt steady. Because unlike my father's impulsive schemes, mine was built on patience and precision. 15 years of record keeping, 15 years of waiting for exactly this moment. Naomi moved quickly, her efficiency matching my resolve. Within a week, she had arranged meetings with mortgage brokers, financial advisors, and bank contacts. 2 days later, I sat across from Thomas Wilson at Triangle Mortgage Associates. His office smelled faintly of leather and coffee, the kind of place where deals carried weight. He scanned my credit score, income statements, and bank balances with clinical detachment. Then he slid a letter across the polished desk. You qualify for the full amount plus the required down payment, he confirmed. At current rates, your interest is very competitive. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. My signature flowed in smooth, deliberate strokes. Each line wasn't just paperwork. It was reclamation. Congratulations, Thomas said. You're on your way to becoming a homeowner. Homeowner. The word tasted foreign. For years, I'd walked through that house as a visitor in my own life. Now, for the first time, ownership was within reach. And they had no idea. Naomi called a week later while I was reviewing quarterly data models at work. Everything's proceeding as planned, she said. The bank accepted our offer. Closing in 20 days, that night my phone lit up like a firestorm. A video of my mother had gone viral in our small-town circles. She sat in her living room, eyes carefully reddened, her voice trembling. Our daughter has abandoned us in our time of need, she cried into the camera. After everything we sacrificed for her education. The irony hit me like acid. Hundreds of comments flooded in beneath the video. What kind of daughter leaves her parents homeless? Family should come first. Ungrateful, selfish. The call started an hour later. Aunt Patricia, who hadn't spoken to me since high school. Pastor Wilson, who once lectured me about honor but never asked why I disappeared from youth trips. Mrs. Kelly from down the street, who used to wave as I dragged myself to night shifts. All of them, suddenly so concerned. Callista, how could you do this? Blood is blood. They're your parents. I didn't answer. I didn't owe them explanations. Instead, I opened my laptop. The mortgage documents were waiting. One click and 20% of my life savings vanished into escrow. Another click and the rest was scheduled to transfer at closing. While the world called me cold, I was signing the papers that made me unstoppable. For 2 weeks I stayed silent. The gossip swirled. Old classmates slid into my messages, demanding to know if the rumors were true. Distant relatives posted thinly veiled lectures on Facebook about family traitors. Even Grant's wife chimed in, her cryptic statuses dripping with venom. Some people forget where they came from. Let them talk. I wasn't fighting for their approval. I was building something far more powerful, the truth. The day before closing, I requested a rare personal day from work, my first in 18 months. I drove 3 towns over to a coffee shop where no one knew my name. I ordered a plain black coffee, opened my laptop, and pulled up Naomi's final document. Upon completion of this transaction, ownership transfers to Callista Marie Carter. The cursor blinked at me, waiting. Outside, spring rain tapped against the windows, soft and steady. Inside, my finger hovered over the trackpad. Click. And just like that, the house that witnessed my betrayal became mine. Not through guilt, not through manipulation. Not through sacrifice, through work, through resilience. Through 15 years of clawing my way back from nothing. I sat there, staring at the confirmation screen, and took a sip of bitter coffee. It didn't taste bitter anymore. It tasted like justice. The next morning, in Naomi's sunlit office, I signed my name across the final closing document. Each letter was a declaration. I own this. The bank representative slid the folder toward Naomi, her tone neutral but her words heavy. The purchase is complete. Naomi handed me a small brass key. It's official. The house is yours, the cool metal pressed into my palm. For a moment, my chest tightened, grief and vindication crashing together like waves. A tear slipped before I could stop it. Sorry, I whispered, wiping it quickly away. Naomi's hand landed on my shoulder. Don't apologize. This isn't just a property for you. She was right. It wasn't a house, it was a reckoning. By the time I drove back to Raleigh, the fallout had already begun. My phone buzzed relentlessly. 6 missed calls from Dad, 3 from Mom, 2 from Grant. A single text from my cousin Amber. What did you do? Your dad is calling everyone for emergency loans. I smiled despite myself. The same man who once sneered that I was harping on the past was now scrambling, desperate. Amber's updates over the next 3 days read like a play-by-play of their unraveling. Grant reaching out to shady friends. Mom posting more teary-eyed videos, her social media army growing louder by the hour. Dad calling anyone who'd listen, spinning half-truths about betrayal. The panic was delicious. For 15 years, they held all the cards. Now I held the deed. And I wasn't about to let them forget it. The driveway looked the same. Cracked pavement, overgrown shrubs. The faint smell of damp wood rising from the porch. But this time when I walked up the steps, the brass key in my purse wasn't for a guest. It was for the owner. Naomi's car was already parked in front. She stood waiting in the foyer, a sleek folder in her hands, her presence radiating authority. We arranged the documents on the oak dining table. The same table where, weeks earlier, they had ambushed me with a calculator and crocodile tears. This time the roles were reversed. The front door creaked open, and they filed in like reluctant students called to detention. Mom's eyes were swollen, her hands clutched a crumpled tissue. Dad's shoulders slumped under a faded polo shirt, his booming presence deflated. Grant hovered in the doorway, arms crossed, jaw clenched like he was holding his rage together with duct tape. Please sit down, I said, gesturing to the chairs across from me. My voice was steady, professional, the way you'd address clients at a board meeting. This is ridiculous, Dad blurted, his voice cracking. You can't just... I can. And I slid the rental agreement across the table. The sound of paper against wood was louder than any shout. Fair market rent is $1,800 a month. First month plus security deposit $3,600 due upon signing. Mom gasped, clutching her chest like I'd shot her. That's outrageous. Naomi leaned forward, her tone calm and measured. It's standard.
And so is this.
She slid another sheet of paper across the table. A cease and desist order regarding the defamatory videos and posts you've circulated online. Mom's mouth opened, then closed. For once, tears didn't come. You have 24 hours to decide, I continued. Sign the agreement or vacate within 30 days. Grant slammed his hand against the chair. You can't throw us out of our own home. It's not your home anymore. I met his glare without flinching. It's mine. His nostrils flared, his fists tightening. For a second, I thought he'd lunge across the table. But he didn't. He knew better. Dad tried a different tactic. His voice trembled with forced authority. We'll fight this. We'll get lawyers. You're welcome to try, Naomi said smoothly, sliding her business card across the table. Have them contact me directly. The air grew thick with their objections, their bargaining, their excuses. Each word bounced off me like rain against glass. I'd built my armor over 15 years, nothing could pierce it now. Finally, Dad slumped back in his chair, his voice small. But we're family, and there it was. The trump card they'd played my entire life. The word family like a chain, heavy and binding. Only now I saw it for what it really was, the weakest hand at the table. I stood, gathering my papers with deliberate care. I let the silence stretch before I spoke. Yes, I said quietly. We are family. And this, I tapped the rental agreement, is what family accountability looks like. I looked around the room at the peeling wallpaper, the scuffed floors, the window where Grandpa once taught me to spot cardinals and blue jays. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay steady. This house was never really mine when I lived here, I continued. But it is now. And the rules have changed. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. My calm was louder than their rage. Dad looked broken, his fists unclenched on the table. Mom stared at her lap, her tears drying into silence. Grant glared daggers, but his eyes flickered with something new fear. I picked up the folder, closed it with a snap, and slid it back into my bag. This conversation is over. You have 24 hours. Naomi stood beside me, her presence like a steel wall. Together we walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Mom's trembling voice. Please, Callista. Don't do this. I paused at the doorway, but I didn't turn around. You already did, I said. The words landed heavier than any slammed door. When I stepped outside into the crisp evening air, it wasn't just the house I had claimed. It was my voice. My power, my justice. And for the first time, the oak table had finally passed judgment, this time in my favor. The ambush came 3 days later. I knew something was wrong the moment I pulled into the driveway. Cars lined the street like it was Thanksgiving on Trisha's silver Buick, Uncle Robert's pickup, even Pastor William's old sedan. Inside, the living room was packed. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me at once. My extended family, arranged in a horseshoe like a firing squad. In the center sat an empty armchair, my designated seat. There she is, Grant announced, voice slick with false cheer. The woman of the hour. The sarcasm rolled off him like oil on water.
Callista, honey, Mom rushed forward, arms outstretched.
Everyone just wanted to talk. I didn't take her hand. I didn't sit in the armchair. Instead, I placed my handbag firmly on my shoulder and scanned the room. Every face looked at me with the same expectation. Repent, bend, break. Pastor Williams rose slowly, leaning on his cane. At 78, his frame was smaller, but his voice still carried that Sunday pulpit weight. Callista, we're concerned about the path you've chosen, he said, his tone measured, heavy with moral authority. Honoring thy father and mother isn't a suggestion. It's a commandment. Behind him, the wall had been carefully curated with family photographs. Christmas mornings, fishing trips with Grandpa. My high school graduation, not a single photo past 19. Not a single reminder of what came after. Aunt Patricia dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Your grandfather would be heartbroken, Callie. To see this family torn apart over money. The mention of Grandpa ignited something sharp inside me. Slowly, I unzipped my handbag. Would you like to know what my grandfather actually wanted? I asked. My voice was calm, but every syllable cut. I pulled out a thick folder and laid it on the coffee table. The sound of paper hitting wood silenced the room. One by one, I spread the documents. Bank statements. Business ledgers. Loan applications using my inheritance as collateral. Receipts for Grant's truck, purchased the same week Dad declared a financial emergency. Finally, the will. Highlighted in yellow. To my granddaughter Callista. I leave $120,000 for her education and future security. I let the silence stretch until the weight of the truth pressed against every chest in the room. 15 years ago, I said, my voice steady, I received $120,000. My grandfather's gift. My future. 3 days later, I signed it over to my father for a business that collapsed within 18 months. The room stilled. Uncle Robert stared at the floor. Cousin Amber bit her lip. While I worked 3 jobs just to pay rent, my parents renovated their kitchen. I slid a stack of Home Depot receipts across the table. While I ate ramen in a studio apartment with no heat, my brother bought a brand new truck. Grant shifted in his seat, his jaw tight. I placed the financing agreement in front of him, his signature bold at the bottom. I kept everything, I said. Every receipt. Every broken promise. Every shred of evidence. Finally, I looked at Pastor Williams. My grandfather taught me about responsibility and consequences. Honoring him doesn't mean ignoring betrayal. It means making sure accountability finally lands where it belongs. Mom's voice cracked. We made mistakes, but we're still your family. Yes, I said softly. You are. I gathered the papers into a neat stack, then stood. The room followed me like a reluctant procession as I walked down the hall into Grandpa's study. The smell of pipe tobacco and old books still lingered in the air. His initials WC were carved into the oak desk he built with his own hands. I turned to face them. You can stay as tenants or you can leave. Those are the only options. The rental agreement landed on the desk with a deliberate thud. Fair market value. First and last month's rent due immediately. Dad's voice broke. You'd make your own parents pay rent? Yes. One word. Unadorned. Final. A hush swept through the room. Later that evening, after the extended family had filed out in stunned silence, the four of us sat again at the oak table. This time Naomi sat beside me, her presence a shield against old patterns. Dad signed first. His pen hovered for a moment, then scratched weakly across the paper. His signature looked smaller than I remembered. Mom signed next, her hand trembling so violently the pen screeched across the page. She never lifted her eyes. Grant was last. His grip was so tight the pen groaned in protest. He scrawled his name, shoved the paper forward, and leaned back, seething. Rent is due on the 1st of each month, I said, standing. Late payments incur a 10% penalty. The meeting was over. For 15 years, they had ruled this house with guilt and manipulation. Tonight, I rewrote the rules. Not with shouting, not with rage, with ink, and for once the ink was mine. 6 months later, the house didn't look the same. The sagging steps were replaced with firm wood. Fresh hydrangeas bloomed along the porch where weeds once crept. The faded siding gleamed with a fresh coat of paint. For the first time in years, the house looked less like a burden and more like a legacy. I parked at precisely noon, the leather-bound rent ledger waiting on the passenger seat. Punctuality mattered in our new arrangement. Inside, Dad was polishing the hallway table, dressed in a pressed uniform from his job at Johnson's Hardware. At 65, inventory clerk wasn't the retirement he'd dreamed of, but it kept the rent paid. Callista, he said with a small nod. No booming voice this time. Just respect. Mom emerged from the kitchen, flour dusting her hands, her cashier name tag still pinned to her blouse. I made apple cobbler, she said, her voice careful. Your grandfather's recipe. The mention of Grandpa tugged me toward the study. The door creaked open to reveal the room I had spent months restoring. His books lined the shelves, spines perfectly straight. His fishing tackle gleamed in custom cases, polished like heirlooms. And above the desk hung my favorite photo. Grandpa teaching 10-year-old me to cast a line at Lake Wheeler, his weathered hands steadying mine. I ran my fingers along the carved initials in the desk of Lucy Walter Carter. The man who taught me that numbers don't lie, that strategy beats impulse. That responsibility matters. That evening we gathered around the oak dining table again. But the dynamic was different. Grant arrived late, tired from his second job, but he hung his jacket neatly instead of tossing it on the floor. Mom passed dishes without sighs of martyrdom. Dad listened more than he spoke. Conversation stayed cautious, circling around neutral topics, work shifts, local news, weather. When Mom mentioned needing new tires, she didn't follow with hints for money. She simply asked, "Any recommendations?" Wilson's Auto has a fundraiser special this week, I said, passing the green beans. She nodded, typing it into her phone. Thank you. After dinner, I walked through the house alone, my fingers brushing the pencil marks on the doorframe where Grandpa once measured my height. On the porch swing, twilight settled soft and steady. Last week, I launched the Walter Carter Technical Scholarship Fund for students whose families had failed them the way mine failed me. 3 young women attended my first financial independence workshop yesterday. Family legacy isn't what you're given, I told them. It's what you do with what was taken. The swing rocked gently beneath me. Lights flickered on across the neighborhood. For the first time, I wasn't haunted by this house. I was home. 15 years ago, my family stole my inheritance, my trust, and my future. Today, I hold the deed to the very house where they betrayed me. Revenge wasn't about cruelty. It was about accountability. And in reclaiming what was stolen, I found something greater than payback: peace. To anyone who's ever been broken by the people who should have protected you, remember this: your story isn't over. You hold the pen. You decide the ending. And if you believe justice, even delayed, is worth the wait, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this.